This is Maha.
This is Dylan.
And we're the hosts of This Wasn't Too Hard, where we talk about process design, organizational improvement, and all the other fun-related topics that we can think of. Today, we're talking about cost of inventory, a frequently misunderstood but very important concept that can save businesses a lot of money. Isn't that right, Dylan?
That's right. Let's get started.
Let's get started. So, Dylan, what was kind of the problem that they were facing?
So they didn't realize they had a problem, but Toyota figured out the problem because they had the restrictions that forced them to be creative about it. What Toyota realized is they had to be nimble, and they didn't have the money to throw around on a big factory. And so what they figured out is if they could reduce the time to delivery, they could reduce the total amount of inventory they just always had on hand, and that was a lot cheaper. And this was part of a larger set of improvements, and some of which I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes, that allowed them to really make things better and cheaper and faster and more efficient than the traditional manufacturers in the US.
So what were some of these items? What was, for example, the cost of inventory in this case, and why did they come up with this solution?
Yeah, so what they realized is, say you have like 10,000 a day in raw material costs that you're using up. Maybe it's steel, maybe it's paint. If it takes you 2 months to put together a car, all these at best, you're going to have 600,000 in just inventory costs bound up in your process. Now, if you can, and it gets even worse than that, because at each stage of manufacturing, you're adding value. You're putting in the time, the labor of your laborers. Maybe there's electricity costs. You got costs of the building that you're in.
For sure.
You got insurance costs, all that are going towards adding value to these little sub-assemblies. You're not realizing any of it until it comes off the line and you can sell it. What Toyota realized, they could substantially reduce their costs. They could free up capital by shortening the amount of time that it takes to deliver. So instead of 600K bound up in your process, you might, if you can shrink that to just a month from raw material to rolling off the line, you've saved 300K that you can then put into other projects or improvements.
Mm-hmm. And that actually sounds like, well, for me, it sounds nimble, for sure. And it sounds like they figured out through the process how to dissect each step, and at the same time, how to actually save money through each step. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of great ideas that I'm sure we'll talk about. There's the idea of Kanbans. There's the idea of single piece flow or single minute exchange of dies. There was a lot of creativity going on in Toyota in the 70s and 80s. And I mean, we all kind of know the end of that story. They're huge, and Chrysler is not what they once were. What's even more impressive is how these ideas have been generalized to other disciplines.
Oh, great.
Yeah, right. So you too at home can take advantage of what Toyota learned in the 80s.
I Kanban myself sometimes, so I can understand. If I don't Kanban myself, sometimes I get lost in my own translation in my own head. It's true.
It's true, yeah. So one of the ways you can think about this is knowledge workers in particular.
Yes.
You don't have the inventory. You don't have like steel that you're hammering or using a press on. But if you, maybe you're an accounts payable clerk and you're doing a 3-way match with an invoice, you do have raw materials and you're adding value to them. You can substantially reduce the cost bound up in your process if you shorten the length of time it takes you to take that raw material and deliver it.
From our brain.
Right, from your brain. And so there was one book, and it'll be in the show notes. The project took this and ran with it for IT, because IT is fundamentally just knowledge work. It's have an idea. Someone else has an idea about your idea. Maybe it's that thing's going to break if you do your idea.
Okay.
And this like collaboration and well-structured flow of ideas. Yeah. It's just a process. It's a manufacturing line. And so they think of change and ideas as the inventory. And what they realized in the book is that very frequently IT, because they're blamed for when things go wrong and never really given credit for when things go right, they hang on to their ideas and they don't make them real. They don't let them deliver the value that
they don't realize them. Exactly. They just keep it on the back. They just keep it on the back burner. It's true.
Right. Yeah. They don't realize those ideas. So this book spawned the modern DevOps movement, which said, failure is not that terrible. Let's just make a change and release it. Let's not get so worked up about what if it breaks something. And this was transformative. The big tech giants of today fundamentally rely on these principles. Facebook and Apple and Google especially, Etsy, really, they couldn't be what they are without this low cost of change, or excuse me, low inventory cost, where the inventory is the thoughts and the changes of the engineers that make these tech giants what they are.
And it's, when you think about it, it's a minuscule behavioral change. It's just about shifting your thoughts just a little bit by not seeing something as a failure, but actually seeing it as an opportunity. I think it was actually one of the FANGs that said you needed to fail fast because that was the best way forward. And it's not. And it's something that everyone can do. It's really something that any small business can actually take a hold of and kind of run with it, whether you're a small business that's in the e-commerce space or whether you're a small business that's outside of that as well. Anyone can actually hold it. Anyone can actually do it. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it. So let's maybe circle back there, Dylan, and tell me about how Ford themselves back in the day actually benefited from learning about these things from the people in Toyota. So let's actually circle back to Ford. How did Ford kind of take these principles that they've learned from the people at Toyota, and how did they apply it to their business? What sort of impact did that have?
I mean, they had to adjust, and I think it wasn't easy for them. I would love to talk to a manufacturing GM or executive at Ford from that time, but and I'm sure they can't speak entirely about it, but it took them a little while.
We can find some resources for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. It took them a while, but they are competitive now, and their quality is competitive with Toyota. Their inventory management, they do just in time, just like everybody else now. I mean, lots of people do this. Boeing does this. GM does this.
And how does just in time relate back, by the way, to cost of inventory here?
Yeah, so just in time is a future idea that's very tied in with Kanbans, and so it's a way of pulling inventory through the system instead of pushing it, and principles there. That's one of the best tricks for removing inventory, excess inventory that you're holding on to. I think there's a great application here too, even for solo people, just people doing their jobs.
Even for a grocery store, actually.
Oh, that's a fantastic example. So if you want to see an example of this done really well, look at Aldi. Aldi is all about excellence and process improvement, and we should definitely talk about them in a future episode.
We will.
We will. So, but this idea of of thought as inventory can be really valuable even for regular people. How many times have you had a situation where you start a project and then it seemed insurmountable, or you bit off too much, or you got bored and you didn't finish it?
Sounds like the life of anyone with ADHD, but yes.
Right, but not, I mean, more than that. Like, so many of us have those problems. Working in a big company, that's the way it just is. You have 30 projects and you're working just a little bit on each of them every week, and they all take 6 months, right? How much happier would your customers be if you just focused on one, got it done, and then moved on to the next one?
So that relates back to on time almost as well, right?
Yeah. And so that, I mean, future topic, talk time is that the term that's frequently used for how long it takes from start to getting something through the cycle, and being able to shorten that. And that, yeah, we can talk about that with single piece flow. Some really great opportunities there.
Mm-hmm. So Dylan, the book that you've mentioned, Six Sigma for Small Business, sounds amazing, because it sounds like this is something that small businesses could apply within their business, and not just something that is for the SDs and Facebooks in the world. So could you give a practical example on how a small business could do that?
Yeah, so one surprising example of the cost of inventory is, think of an accounting firm. Maybe a CPA firm does a lot of individual returns, especially around this time of year.
Oh yeah.
And so they have a problem because it's not actually that difficult to file a return. But if they need more information, or there's a question, or they're missing some documents, they can start the return, say, oh, crud, I need this stuff. Go email the client, go on to the next one. Mm-hmm. But that's inventory. They've spent effort on it. It's work in progress. And it just sits there like inventory. It's not making them a dime until it's signed and filed. It might be worth their time to deliver or invest in some sort of auto emailing follow-up thing where they can say, Bob's on the bother list, and their client gets an email every 3-4 days to, follow up with what they need. It doesn't even have to be a very fancy automatic process. You just spend 10 minutes going through your list in Excel and saying, oh, today's Thursday, it's time to email Bob again. And it might be, there might be surprising value that you'd be leaving on the table, that some sort of system to keep on that inventory and get Bob's documents in, get it filed, get it out, that you'd be leaving on the table.
And you're absolutely right, Dylan. The great thing about us as human beings is that it's not that we don't want to submit those documents. We actually do. We just get busy sometimes and we forget. Mm-hmm. So just by automating the process, not only is a business saving a lot of money and time, but just reminding people of these things. But they're even taking a lot of pressure off their own employees and allowing their employees to spend more time on other more precious projects.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
Well, I try my best. So Dylan, is there anything about the cost of inventory process that we want to talk about still? Because I think it connects really well with the next episode too.
It certainly does. Yeah, next week we're going to be talking about Kanbans. A lot of people have baggage about Kanbans. And we're going to talk about those original tubs with the little pieces of tape on them.
Ooh.
And how they really help Toyota bring down its cost of inventory.
I actually didn't know that it was tubs that they actually had the Kanban processes on, but It sounds really cool. They definitely were nimble, just like you said. So thanks, Dylan. That was great. And thanks for our guests for joining us on today's episode. If you like our content and would like to hear more from us, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and follow on your platform of choice. And until then, see, that wasn't too hard.
Too hard.